Hello there, I'm Jimmy Vegas and this is how to create an FPS game in Unity, and welcome to episode 6. In this tutorial we are going to do some C# programming to allow our player to fire the weapon. Don't forget, click the subscribe button and click on the bell icon as well to stay up to date with every tutorial still to come in this series and everything else on game development on my channel. With that in mind, let's get to work. So C# programming, a lot of people find probably the most tedious thing about game development. If you've never programmed before, don't know anything about C#, don't worry, I'll explain everything as we go along. There are a couple of things that we do need to set up before we get into scripting, just so as when we get there, we know what we need to place in there, i.e. names. So we now need to go to our pistol, and we need to add to its controller. So this here is the animation. Remember, we unticked loop time. This one next to it is the controller. This controls the animations that are attached to the weapon. So if we open it up, we end up in the animator panel. Not to be confused with the animation panel, they are two separate things. We can see this is our animation that we created last time, and if I hold my middle mouse wheel, we can bring ourselves up. We need to create a brand new state that contains no animation. The reason for this is because we want to be able to control when this animation is played via C#. So let's right click, create state, empty. And if we right click on this now and click default, that means that this animation is the main animation. It's the only one that will be played until we reference any other animation via coding, which is what we'll do with Fire Pistol. Both of these names need to be remembered. So let's head back to our scene view. And we also need to make sure that we have the right key set up in our input to make sure that the left mouse button is set correctly so as we can reference it in the C# script once again. To do that, let's go to Edit, let's go to Project Settings, and you'll see Input Manager right here. And if we click Axes, you'll see a list. The one we're most looking forward to using, well, I say most looking forward to using, it's more kind of hoping to use, is Fire 1. And you can see here that we can either use the left control or mouse 0. Mouse 0 references the left mouse button, so this is set correctly. I think by default this is correct. It's always going to be this way. You can change it if you want to, depending on your own input. I would suggest checking a couple of things out here. For example, cancel is going to be escape. Jump is going to be spacebar, if we can find the right one. And just look through it if you want to change anything. But like I say, by default, everything should be A-OK with this one. Just remember, Fire 1. Now let's create that script that allows us to fire our weapon. So let's go to our assets window. Let's right click, create, folder. We'll have this as scripts. So any scripts that we write end up in this folder one way or another. Let's create another folder in here and we'll call this weapons. So any script associated with a weapon, whether it's our pistol, whether it's a sniper, whether it's shotgun, whatever, will be inside here. So let's right click, create C# script, and we'll call this one pistol fire. And now we just need to open that up in Visual Studio. So as I said earlier in the series, I'll be using Visual Studio. It doesn't matter too much what version you use. I mean, I'm using 2017 and it really isn't out of date. It never will be out of date. Even if you're using something like MonoDevelop, which is fairly old, the script will still be the same. Nothing is really going to change here. So when you open your script up for the very first time, you'll be presented with a couple of lines of code. Let's go through some of these lines of code and understand what they're for. The first couple of lines up here, these are known as the namespace. These help the script realize and recognize different aspects of the code we are writing. In short terms, you could kind of think of them as a library. The script needs to reference a couple of things from different locations, and this is a great way for the script to realize it's using, for example, Unity Engine, so it knows that's where to pull information from to help it understand the lines of code we're typing. Next we have the public class, and you'll notice right here we have pistol fire. That is the exact name of our script. It is important that the class and the script name are identical. If they are wrong for any reason, whether we accidentally type pistol fires here, it means that the script itself will not work. You may not necessarily see an error, but it just will not work. They do have to match perfectly. But if you're going to follow along with me, you shouldn't have any problems with this because we never modify the class unless it is absolutely necessary. Next down, we have an open curly bracket. And what that means is that this is the starting section of, in this case, the class. You can see a couple of other curly brackets, but we'll get to them in a couple of minutes. Next, we have this green line here, and this is known as an annotation. An annotation is not strictly a line of code, it's more of a note that you can place inside the code to give some indication of what is going on. So for example, this one says, start is called before the first frame. That gives us an indication to say that the below section in what is known as void start is called on the first frame only. What is void start? Void start is a method. So when you're writing code, you'll write most of the time something called a method. And that is different segments of the script that can be executed at different times, depending on what you're trying to do. So for example, the method void start, as we said, is called before the first frame. Update, which is a little further down, is called once per frame. So the update method will run constantly while the script is active. Again, we come to some curly brackets, and this one is an open one, but we also have this closed one. That dictates the end of a certain section, whether it be a method, a class, a coroutine, something like that. It just basically tells you this is the end of it, carry on. And the same applies down here with this update method. And then once again, we've got another one to close out that class. So that is the basics of a script. What do we want this script to do? Well, we want it to fire our weapon. So I mentioned 3 things to do with the curly brackets. I mentioned the class, I mentioned a method, and I also mentioned a coroutine. So we're going to use a coroutine in this script, but not just yet. We're going to place a couple of variables in place first. What are variables? Variables are a way for the script to realize and recognize instances of data. So for example, it could be a number, it could be some letters, it could be a sound, it could be a game object, it could be a boolean being true or false. It could be a multitude of things. We're going to create 2 variables in this script. We're going to create a variable for our weapon, and we're also going to create a boolean. That boolean is going to determine whether we are currently firing our weapon or whether we are not. So I'll explain a little bit more of why we're going to do it this way a little later on in the script. For now, we do not need these annotations, and we do not need this void start method. So we can select those and press delete. So let's go just above our void update, and let's type our very first variable. Like I said, the first variable is going to be the gun itself, the pistol. And to declare a variable, the way we're going to do it is I want things to be visible. I want them to be public so we can see different things of what is happening within the script as we play. So we're going to type the word public. We're then going to tell it what type of variable this is going to be. And as I said, it's going to be the weapon, which is a game object. Now, capitalization is important as well. And when we type the words game object, we need to put a capital G and a capital O. It is important because game object with a lowercase g is something different than declaring it as a capital G. So capitalization is vital to coding. It has to be accurate each and every time for the script to work as intended. So once we've declared what type of variable it's going to be, we can then give it a name. So we can just call this, let's call it black pistol, semicolon. Now you'll notice I put a lowercase b and an uppercase p on the name. It's up to you how you want to do it. That's known as camel casing. People code in different ways. They might put an underscore between words. They might put a capital letter on each word. I think it just depends on your own personal preference. If you've never coded before, I'd say the most common way of finding things like this is this way. Lowercase for the first letter, uppercase for every subsequent word. So the next variable we're going to use is a Boolean, which is true or false logic gate. So we can declare this by saying public bool B-O-O-L, and we can call this is firing. So we're determining, are we currently firing the weapon or not? By default, I actually want to put this equal to the state of false with a semicolon at the end. Now you'll notice both of them have a semicolon at the end. Why? That's a way for the script to realize that that is the end of the line. We can then move on to the next line of code. So it's a bit like a sequence following down the screen. So most of the time you'll find things like this. Most lines of code will end in a semicolon, as they do up here for the namespace. So where do we go from here? Well, do you remember earlier when we had a look at the left mouse button? We saw that it was named Fire1. Now, we want this to only occur if we're pressing that left mouse button. And what we're going to do is we are actually going to combine two if statements. So we're going to nest them together. But there are different ways of doing this. You could put an if statement and another if statement. But in this case, like I say, we're going to follow it down in logical order and nest two if statements. So let's start by saying if, like I say, we need to detect our input. Are we pressing that left mouse button? So we can ask if input, and that is a capital I, dot get button down. So we're asking, is the input pressing a button, but what button is it? In brackets and quotes the name of the button. In this case, we had it down as Fire1. So quote, close bracket, and open curly bracket, and hit return. So let's just quickly recap for those who are brand new to all of this. We are saying if the button down is known as Fire1, then we execute the next line of code. If we're not pressing that, we don't need to worry, nothing will be ran in the code. So yes, let's say we are pressing down that left mouse button. We now need to check, are we firing that weapon? So we can put if is firing equals false, and then close bracket and open curly bracket and hit return again. And you can see how this is nesting. Now we've put a double equals here. Why is it not a single equals like it is here? Well, best way to describe that is when we have an instance of a double equals, it means we're asking a question in this case. Is it absolutely equal to? Whereas here we're telling that is firing is equal to false. So we're stating that this is your condition, and here we're asking, is it equal to false? So if it is, we would run the next line of code. What is the next line of code? Well, that is where our coroutine comes in. Why are we creating a coroutine, and what is a coroutine? A coroutine is basically kind of the same as a method in its simplest terms, but it also allows us to control time to some degree. So for example, we want to fire our weapon, but we don't want to repeatedly fire it. We only want to be able to fire our weapon again after, in this case, let's say, a quarter of a second. So that means that in a method, we can't say wait for a quarter of a second before we refire, whereas in a coroutine, we can wait for a quarter of a second before we fire once again. So if we go to void update and the open curly bracket, let's follow this marker line all the way down, and it will tell you where it ends. We need to put this coroutine after void update. So if we go down 2 lines, we can actually put a coroutine here. To declare a coroutine, we type the word IEnumerator. Make sure you do type IEnumerator, not IEnumerable. That will not work. Make sure it's a capital I and a capital E as well. And we can call this anything we want, literally anything, as long as it's not another coroutine name, another method name, or the script name itself, or doesn't kind of reference, let's say, a variable. Make it something logical and sensible. So in this case, I'm just calling it fire the pistol, and then parentheses, open close bracket, open curly bracket, and then we can go here. So we need to follow a specific order of what we're doing in this code. Firstly, we need to say that we don't want to have this repeating itself, so we need to set is firing equals to true straight away, just so as this bit of code doesn't constantly run. So is firing equals true. Therefore, this section here will not run even if we press the left mouse button. Next line of code is going to be playing the animation that we created. To do that, we need to access the animator component. And if I head back into Unity and click on the pistol, you can see that here we do now have that animator component. Remember when we created the animation? Well, this animator was added automatically, so we need to access it to play the animation. So we can say black pistol dot get component, and in spiky brackets animator, because that's the name of the component, and then open close bracket. And then what do we want to do? We want to play an animation from this animator. So dot play, and that's a capital P there, remember, capitalization vital as always, and then in brackets and quotes the name of the animation that we created. So if we head back to Unity and go into animations, weapons, fire pistol was the animation. So in here, let's type fire pistol, and then quote, close bracket, and semicolon. So now we have played that animation. Now what do we want to do? We want to wait just a little bit. So like I say, it was about a quarter of a second before we want to be able to fire it again. Your time may differ. You may want it longer, shorter. I think it's very dependent on your animation. So I'm going to say here, yield, which means basically stop, return new. So we're returning a new value, wait 4 seconds, and in brackets, the amount of time we want to wait. Like I say, a quarter of a second, which is 0.25. And because it's a decimal number, this is known as a float. We have to put F in there as well. That just helps the script realize that, yeah, it's a decimal number. It's just one of the little quirks that you have to deal with when coding with C#. Then we close bracket, semicolon. After that, we need to return the pistol to its original animation. In this case, its new state, which was the default one. So if we head back to Unity and click on animator, it's this one we need to return it back to, new state. So let's head back into Unity, and I'm going to copy this line of code. There's no point me typing it out once again when I can copy and paste it a lot quicker than retyping. So now what we're going to do is we are going to change fire pistol to something else. So it's going to be new state. If you did rename that new state earlier on, your name would be whatever you changed it to. So for me, new state. Finally, the last line of code is going to be to reset that is firing boolean. So we need to set it back to false to say that we can run all of this again. So is firing equals false, semicolon. That is our coroutine completed. Now we need to tell this section up here, it needs to run this coroutine if both of these conditions are set. We can say start coroutine, and in brackets the name of that coroutine that you've just written along with its parentheses. So fire the pistol, open close bracket, semicolon, and save. So that is our first script done. We'll probably change this as we go further on. For example, when we create a muzzle flash or some sound effects for firing our weapon. But for all intents and purposes, that is the basic script written. Now let's apply it to our game. So let's head back to Unity, and it will take just a second to compile. There we go. And if you do have any problems or errors, you'll likely see a message down here in red. If you go to the console, you'll be able to see where that error is. what the error is, and more than likely how to fix it. It'd probably be something like a spelling error or a missing semicolon, something like that. They're the most common ones. So, what do we do now to get this script working in our game? Well, let's go to Game Object, Create Empty. This empty game object will be what we use to contain a lot of our scripts for global objects. So in this case, we're going to attach that weapon script to here. So I'm going to right click, rename, and call this one Global Control. And I'm actually going to bring it up right to the top of the hierarchy. Next, let's drag and drop that pistol fire script onto there. And you'll see it appear, there's our black pistol variable, and there is our is firing variable. So we can drag and drop this pistol over here, and that script will then know that it needs to get the animator component from that exact place. So let's then drag pistol over here, and we're pretty much ready to go. Let's press play. And fire. Cool. So you can see every time I click, the weapon is firing. Now, one thing I have noted, it has gone a bit astray. It looks like the pistol itself has decided it doesn't want to be rotated correctly. So let's put that rotation back to 0. And let's try once again. Cool. So if you could imagine firing that weapon now with a bang, bang, and a muzzle flash. Yeah, I think that's pretty decent. Again, this all comes down to how you want to create your game. Take your time with a lot of these things, and if you need help or anything, the comment section is below. If you want to get hold of the script that we have written today, it is on my website as well. If you head over there, Downloads and Assets, FPS tutorial number 6, you can download the script that we've written right there. So next tutorial, what we're going to do is we're going to add some very, very simple crosshairs so we can kind of see where we're aiming. And we're also going to add in a muzzle flash in its simplest terms, just to kind of give a bit more reaction to our weapon firing. So until that next tutorial, thanks very much for watching.